we're taking a look at the 10 deadliest natural disasters in U.S. history because, hey, why not? Hurricane Katrina, death toll an estimated 1,300. Katrina was a Category 5 hurricane that hit the Gulf Coast in August of 2005. A lot could be said for Katrina, the response to the disaster by federal and local officials as well as the people of the area being a discussion all to itself. But it cost $125 billion in damage and displaced more than 1 million people, especially from the city of New Orleans, 80% of which ended up being flooded due to failing levees. And also it gave us this.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
The Peshtigo Fire of 1871. Death toll between 1,500 and 2,500 people. We're going with a lower number for order purposes here. On October 8th, 1871, a controlled forest burning in northeastern Wisconsin got out of control, primarily around the town of Peshtigo, hence its name. That ended up destroying over 1.2 million acres of forest land. Even though it's the deadliest wildfire in recorded history, most people have never heard of it. And that's because it happened to occur the same day as the Great Chicago Fire, which left a third of that city's inhabitants homeless. Coincidence or comet? Yeah, that's actually a real theory that some people put out there. The 1980 heat wave, death toll 1,700. Heat wave struck the Midwest and Southern Plains area of the U.S. in 1980, with many cities setting records for high temperatures only to have them broken a few days later. Dallas, Texas had 42 days in a row of over 100-degree weather, and though the 2011 heat wave lasted longer, the 1980 version had more fatalities. Luckily, eventually the drought and heat wave were broken with the arrival of hurricane season. The 1893 Cheniere Caminata Hurricane, death toll 2,000. Also known as the Great October Storm, seeing as it hit in early October, this Category 4 hurricane literally wiped a town off the map due to 16-foot storm surges on the island of Cheniere Caminata, Louisiana. About $5 million in damages occurred, and this single structure survived. The Johnstown Flood, death toll 2,200. Also known as the Great Flood of 1889, I almost didn't include this one because most of the damage was done by the failure of the South Forks Dam, but extremely heavy rains were a huge factor that led to its failure, so we're counting it. On May 31st, 1889, the dam gave away, releasing over 14 million cubic meters of water onto Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And also adding fault to the dam's failure was the fact that it and the reservoir that it held back were bought by investors and turned into a private club. A club who had the dam's height lowered to allow for cars to drive over it, plus they didn't replace the old venting system that had been taken out, so when the water started to rise, they had no way to release the pressure. So yeah, these were some pretty big factors. This was also the first major rollout of the American Red Cross. The 1928 Okeechobee Hurricane, death toll 2,800. A Category 5 hurricane that hit Florida. Most deaths occurred around Lake Okeechobee, though the rest of Florida and Puerto Rico were hit rather hard. The same storm killed another 1,200 in the Caribbean Guadalupe Islands, but that's part of France, so it doesn't count here. It's also the only hurricane to ever hit Puerto Rico as a full-on Category 5, and it's technically the third deadliest hurricane in American history. Don't worry, we're gonna get to the other two. Hurricane Maria, death toll just under 3,000. The most recent on the list from September of 2017, Maria was a Category 5 hurricane that did most of her damage in Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. Though she did also end up riding up the eastern seaboard, causing damage there as well. All told, it caused over $91 billion in damages, and they're still trying to get everything back to normal. The The 1906 San Francisco earthquake, death toll over 3,000. The deadliest earthquake in American history occurred on April 18, 1906 near San Francisco. A magnitude 7.9 quake, it caused fires that raged through and ended up destroying 80% of the city over 4 days and nights. Supposedly the fire was made worse by the fact that most insurance companies would pay out for fire damage but not earthquake, so apparently some people were just setting their houses on fire, because otherwise they would have a destroyed home and no insurance money. The whole fiasco ended up costing about $11 billion in today's money. The 1899 San Siriaco hurricane, death toll an estimated 3,800, because Puerto Rico is part of America too, damn it. This Category 4 hurricane that made landfall in August of 1899 ended up sticking around for over a month, the longest in recorded history for the Atlantic, as it made its way through the Caribbean and up along the eastern coast. The vast majority of its damage was done to Puerto Rico, where 250,000 people were left homeless. But if there is a plus side, there was only about $20 million in $1899 worth of damages. The 1900 Galveston hurricane, death toll roughly 8,000. The deadliest hurricane and natural disaster in American history. This Category 4 storm made landfall in late August 1900, tearing through the Caribbean before coming to shore in Texas. Galveston was the worst hit, the majority of deaths coming from that city, with surges up to 12 feet high, leaving over a quarter of the city homeless and caused about $35 million in damages. That's just over $1 billion in today's money. And one last thing here, when it comes to naming storms in America, that started with the Navy during World War II, where many of the men would name typhoons after their wives and girlfriends to tell the storms apart. This was eventually adopted for Atlantic hurricanes after World War II, but alphabetic call signs were used. You know, Baker, Cobra, Dog, Easy, Fox, and so on. But in 1953, they rolled out the much more modern system of giving the storms actual names, and yes, until the year 2000, all those names were female. Maybe it was a hell hath no fury thing.